Hey, hello, this is Moon Griffon. Right, glad to have you with our podcast, the Moon Griffon Podcast. Make sure you check it out. We do a lot of national issues and things like that we want you to be a part of. We try to talk about things you may not be hearing about. And then we try to have some great guests. And I got a great guest today. He's been on my radio program. You've seen him on all of major networks. And he does a wonderful job. It's Mr. Phil Kerpen, President of American Commitment. Phil, thanks for being part of the program. How you doing, bud?
My pleasure, Moon. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
No doubt about it. I'm actually a question that you probably don't want to answer, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway. And the reason I'm saying that is I'm laughing to keep from crying, Phil, to be honest with you. We headed to World War III. Is there any chance we could go into another world war with all the stuff going on with Ukraine, especially with China and Russia? And I just want to get your thoughts on that just for a second.
Well, remember, World War I was originally named the war to end all wars, and everyone thought, oh, after that, it could never happen again. And then, of course, we had World War II. So you never want to say never, but, there's so much business that's now conducted internationally, and you got to think that the incentives to avoid an open war between the major powers are so enormous in terms of, the disruption, the loss of life, the economic costs, everything else, that you kind of think we're not going to have open warfare, with another superpower like Russia or China, just because of, how potentially catastrophic it could be, both in terms of loss of life and the economic impact and everything else. And it's been a long time since we've had a world war. So you want to think it can't happen, but you can never rule something like that out. It's the wrong kind of escalation, misperceptions, whatever it is. I don't know that you can rule it out. And, I don't know how far you can push, backing a proxy against a great power before they just decide that they're at war with you too. So I don't know the answer to that. I want to hope that it can't happen.
Feeling like you, I don't want it to happen. But man, when I see the things that are going on in the world, it's kind of chaos. I mean, even the United States right now is in chaos. It's like we had this country that was heading in the right direction, and now we got a country where everything's changed. What used to be one way, now it's another way. And then you look at what's happening internationally, and look at what China, which I think, and I think you're going to agree with me, they've really got their paws in the United States of America now. TikTok, universities, schools. You got what's happening at the border. You have fentanyls coming across. That's from China. It's like they're doing a lot of stuff, but it's not the war where they're going to come and drop something on us. It's as much as the war that's here in the United States of America. And it looks like they're creating some of the division. I may be way off by telling you everything I said. I'm just telling you from my perspective as I see what's going on. And that bothers me. I hope I'm wrong. I'm like you. I don't want a world war.
Well, look, I think China definitely sees the United States as a strategic rival, and China wants to be the world's dominant power. And, they look at these things a little bit differently than we do. We think the United States is like this great, fabulous tradition. Our Constitution is hundreds of years old, all this kind of, they think like in terms of thousands of years. They think this is like, they think of the U.S. age as a blip in the grand scheme of things. And they have a lot of grand plans and everything else. Now, all of that said, their communist system is not a very good system. We have a lot of big advantages over them. Because our system is so much better. That said, they're definitely a real threat in a lot of ways. And all the stuff you mentioned, you didn't even mention that they're buying up farmland all over the U.S., which a lot of people have huge alarm bells going off over. And definitely they're trying to influence our media and our children and all that other stuff. But, towards what end? Maybe someday they try to invade Taiwan or something like that, and we have to defend Taiwan. But, even that's a little bit crazy if you're the Chinese government, because you can't take Taiwan without millions of deaths. It would be a catastrophe for them. Taiwan has like F-16 missiles, all kinds of U.S. equipment So, I think that they're a strategic rival. I think they're an economic rival. The idea of open warfare, though, I don't really see that scenario.
Good. I'm glad you're telling me that. Phil Kerpen, my special guest and president for American Commitment. And, of course, you've seen him all over the national programs. Well, I wanted to get that out the way. Don't forget, they got balloons flying across every night and then. I don't want to forget the old balloons.
Right. Yeah, that too. Well, but then they said they shot down balloons. They thought it was just like private hobbyists or something. Yeah, so they're like shooting down weather balloons of like some poor dude got his weather balloon up and they come by and shoot it with a missile.
Oh, no, I've been watching. I'm not telling my family, nothing in there right now.
Right.
One of the things that, just an observation of America, one of the things that has kept America great is that we've had low costs for food, which is great for the people. I'm 61 for as long as I can remember. And that don't mean we didn't have some spikes with inflation and stuff. And we had low energy prices, low cost of energy. It doesn't mean we didn't have some spikes through our time, but I always thought those two things gave us an advantage over the rest of the world. I just felt like that because when you got low food cost and low energy, you can feed yourself, you can live, you can work, you can travel, you can do everything you do if those two things go hand in hand. Phil, those are both high right now. I don't see any reason for them to come back down because they're all into this global warming and green new stuff, which, by the way, I don't believe in any of that. I'm just being blunt with you. But it does bother me, the price of food and the price of energy now. What do you say? Because I really think sovereignty-wise, when we got food and abundance of food that's cheap and energy and abundance of energy that's cheap, not only do we eat and do the things we do, we also protect ourselves. When I make a comment like that, what do you think?
Well, I think that's a very, very good point. And, frankly, the policy changes that we've seen in the last couple of years it's not just that we've got inflation and, that everything's becoming more expensive. We definitely had a huge bout of inflation, especially, during COVID, the $6 trillion that was spent in extra COVID spending, 90% of that was printed money from the Fed. And so, of course, the price of everything went up a lot. But energy and food went up a lot more even than everything else.
Yep.
And so there was something going on there that was not just the fact that a lot of extra dollars were printed, but we also had policies that intentionally drove the price of energy much higher because we had an administration that said, we're going to, he said day one, there's going to be no leasing in federal lands and waters and canceling pipelines, all of this, the whole of government approach to global warming, as he termed it, which basically means he has every single agency trying to stop every oil and gas and coal project possible. And so, we've had this huge upward pressure on energy in particular, even above and beyond the inflation that was created by all the money printing. And I think there's similar pressures in the agriculture side also when they bring back the Waters of the United States rule, all the various EPA regulations, all those sort of restrictions. And then there's the all the left-wing cultural nonsense and the DEI and the ESG and sort of corporate America pushing an anti-energy agenda as well. That's on top of kind of the official policies, but it's additive to it. It makes it a lot worse. And so I think that we are losing what's really been one of the key advantages for America. And by the way, affordable energy is much more important in a country like America that's wide open than in most European countries where, people could walk to work. And very few Americans could do that because the distances are too great. And so, not only are we losing sort of one of our great advantages, but we're potentially handicapping ourselves economically even worse than other countries that have done similarly stupid things because of, how spread out we are as a country. And so, I think that you're right. We've got to figure out how to reverse that. The challenge is that, almost all of this stuff has been driven by executive branch actions, regulations, executive orders, or even informal jawboning with Wall Street and corporate America. And, they had their big corporate summit and all that kind of thing. And so these things are very difficult to reverse. Even if we somehow, we didn't even win the Senate, but even if we somehow took control of Congress, maybe get the White House back even. How do you fight against, corporate America and the education establishment, everything that's bought into the insane global warming stuff? Moon, it's a good thing that global warming is not the end of the world because if it were, we'd all be dead because none of the stuff that they're proposing even makes any difference for global warming.
Well,
but it definitely makes a lot poorer.
I put out a podcast not too long ago, Phil, and I think it's a 100% communist movement. And what I say that is everything they do with that movement is to control your life. ESG and banking. I have some of your guys on with me for that. Food, no fertilizer. They're talking about eating plant burgers and insect burgers, and you better learn to do that. And they want to do away with meat. And if you look at the big movement, they want to do away with any kind of beef, pork, chicken. They literally want to do away with things that make us better, and they want to limit what you can make and where you drive to. I mean, I go on and on. I don't have to tell you, but I think it's a communist movement, because when I look at communism, they totally control everything you do. That's what I think the green movement is. It's just not called communism. It's called Green New Movement, global warming, whatever you want to call it. And I don't think we can hurt the earth. I think the earth can eat us up before we eat the earth up. And I think it's just communism. I don't think it's anything less than communism.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if communism is exactly the right word, though, because the communists nationalized everything. Right? They didn't really have large private companies. This sort of new authoritarianism uses the international corporate sector and kind of.
Yeah, but Phil, don't you think it's ultimately to control everything you do? That's the comparison I'm making with communism. They want to control you.
There was a thing on the World Economic Forum website that said that COVID is the test run for what they're going to do on climate and how they're going to use, social pressures and all this kind of stuff. It's not like a secret conspiracy. They literally posted on their website.
I know. I saw it.
This is what we're going to do.
I saw it.
So yeah, I mean, this stuff is very real. There's no question about that in my mind. And by the way, the fact that most people went along with all the crazy restrictions during COVID should make you very scared that they're going to go along with the permanent stuff on climate or whatever the excuse is.
Well, the reason I make the comparison is just because I look at the control factor. If you look at China, they control their people whenever they want to. And I think it's the way to do it to get to where they eventually want to get to. And which is, I think, a communist country. You got, here's our narrative. Here's what you think. Here's what you do. And if you look at it, you look at all what's going on now, schools and school systems, the libraries. If you don't have that narrative, then you're out. If you don't have that narrative, they look down upon you. And they're doing it through the banks, and they're doing it through corporate America. And I think overall, when they get it to where they want to get it, the government's going to actually run them and run everything and tell people what to do. That's my concern. You might be right. It might not look like communism today, but will it look like that tomorrow?
It's kind of a semantic question. I mean, I don't know if communism is exactly the right word, but it's a very dangerous authoritarian mind.
Well, how about if I say something that scares the hell out of me?
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't want to have an argument about what word we use for it, because I think we agree about what they're trying to do.
Yes, sir.
Look, I mean, the challenge is that, as conservatives, we always act like all you got to do is win the next election, and no problem, we'll fix everything. And it doesn't work that way, because if they've taken over all the cultural institutions, and they've got the schools, and they've got the media, and they've got Hollywood, and they've got corporate boardrooms increasingly. We saw what happened with Trump. He was extremely limited in what he was able to accomplish. He did a lot of things, but how much of it has really lasted in a meaningful way? And so, this is like the big challenge: is how do you fight this battle on all of those fronts? How do you do what they did over decades? How do you? And it's a big challenge, a big question. I'll tell you what I think is the most encouraging thing that's happened over the last couple of years, though. More and more states now are doing universal school choice programs, education savings accounts, letting parents have control of where their kids go to school, because conservatives have a lot more kids than liberals do, right? But then we send our kids to schools where the liberals, sort of capture them, right? So if we can fix that problem, if we can educate our kids in schools that actually teach American values and teach, capitalist values and, religious values and the things that we believe in, right? Then maybe that can permeate for all those other institutions. So that's, I think, the biggest positive we've seen in recent years. But I mean, what we're up against is, it's a lot. It's a lot.
I feel what you're saying, though, is the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., and everybody that runs the education department, the EPA and all that, they all in. And they're the ones helping make rules. They're not elected, but they're helping make the rules and regulations of everything we do. Take banking fences with the ESGs. And I've had people on left and right. That's very scary what they're trying to do to people. And I wonder one day, I don't want an electric car, Phil. I have no problem with them. You can buy 3 of them if you want to. I like my combustion engine. That's what I want to do. I don't mind paying for them. But, I may walk into a bank one day and they're going to say, hey, Mr. Griffon, we want to help you, but we see where you buying one of those gas guzzling fossil fuel vehicles. And all of a sudden, I'm not rated high enough to get a loan. I'm using that as an example, but that's the kind of stuff that worries me. It's the bureaucracy that's in now, and it's in thick.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that their efforts to get everyone into an electric car are guaranteed to fail for a number of reasons, not the least of which that the resources for building electric cars are more limited than the resources for internal combustion vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're going to run into huge resource constraints. The lithium for the batteries alone is going to prevent turning the whole fleet over into electric. And it's interesting. There was a thing in Scientific American, which has become the most insane left-wing woke outlet out there, which has almost nothing to do with science. But there was a thing in Scientific American that because there isn't enough lithium for everyone to have an electric car, some people are just going to have no car at all.
Yeah.
This is their solution to the problem of there not being enough lithium.
Once again, total control. Let me throw a couple other things, 4 or 5 minutes with you. His name is Phil Kerpen, President of American Commitment. Great guy, smart guy, great organization, and you see him all over the country. You're watching your national news, and you'll see him pop up. A couple other quick things. Debt. I mean, what we did, $9 trillion worth of debt since COVID hit, somewhere along that line. And inflation, and they kind of go hand in hand. Are we ever going to get serious about our debt? Because what I read the other day, we're going to add another $20 trillion over the next 10 years, maybe more than that. And I don't know how that's ever manageable ever again for the United States of America.
Yeah, we've got about $31 trillion in the national debt, and you're right. In 10 years on the current path, it'll be $50 trillion.
Wow. What do you do with that?
Well, the thing is that what's the famous quote? If something can't go on forever, it won't. Sooner or later, we're not going to be able to finance the government if we just continue to spend trillions that we don't have. And at some point, you can have one of two things happen. Either you have an acute bond market crisis and you have huge tax hikes and spending cuts and total chaos, like we saw in Greece, or they just sort of slowly try to print their way out of it and just monetize it all with money creation. And then, then we'll see what happened in the last couple of years with all the COVID money printing. That'll become a chronic thing. And we're going to have, 7, 8, 9, 10% inflation every year, just every year.
But that's horrible for the American citizen. That's horrible for the American citizen.
It's catastrophic. Of course.
No doubt.
It's a huge problem. It'll undermine economic growth, undermine the ability of people to build any kind of savings for themselves, to even maintain their standard of living, let alone get ahead. And so, we've got to cut federal spending. There's no two ways about it. We can, the sooner we do it, the less difficult and painful it will be. The hope is that the House Republicans are serious and they're going to demand real spending cuts as a condition of any increase in the federal debt. And, they say that's what they're going to do. And of course, now they've got to negotiate with the Democratic Senate and White House. So obviously that presents a challenge, but I think they've got to deliver something. And by the way, they have a much better argument. Because what the Democrats are basically saying is, look, we just want to add more debt and not change anything.
Yep.
And, you look at the path that we're on, you say, that's insane.
Yep.
The Republicans are saying, okay, well, if we have to add more debt, we're going to have spending cuts to at least improve the picture going forward. I mean, that's a winning argument, I think.
It's a winning argument if you win an argument if you're willing to fight for what you believe in. If you're not going to fight for it, you got to believe that nobody believes.
Well, they've got to make the case to the American people, but I think that if they have the debate to make the case to the American people, they should be able to embarrass the Democrats into at least, counter proposing some of their own cuts and negotiating.
Real quick, couple more quick questions, let you go. And this could be a real quick one. Crypto money. Please tell me we never go into this. You talk about control everybody. If you go to some kind of crypto.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of a central bank digital currency, almost every country in the world is trying to do this.
Looks like a disaster.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, it means you wouldn't be able to spend cash anymore. There'd be no such thing. Instead, everything would be electronic and everything would be traceable, and they would know everything you buy. And, at some point in time,
Phil, real quick,
you're not allowed to buy something.
Real quick, China, communist country, this is what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, they've got
another move toward communism.
They use very sophisticated, social credit, social control schemes. And I will say this, though, their COVID lockdowns crumbled completely and collapsed. And they, when those protests started, they saw where things were going and they flipped 180 degrees. And so even in China, there are limits. But yeah, I think it's very dangerous. I think that people need to be able to spend money in a way that the government can't trace.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. That's a very basic thing. And I do worry about, the efforts to get rid of that.
I'm going to let you do this in a minute. You're not going to be able to answer in a minute. Medicare and Social Security. How big a trouble are we in if we don't do something to change the direction it's going?
Well, the trust fund for Medicare is exhausted in 6 years. The Social Security one's exhausted in 12. That means that it's going to take large general fund transfers to prop those programs up from that point forward indefinitely if there aren't changes. And of course, how do you pay for that? How do you pay for that? Probably with chronic inflation, because unless you cut other things or what have you. Now, I think I wish Bush hadn't botched the Social Security reform effort back in 2005, because we'd done it 20 years ago, we'd be in a much, much better position now. And by the way, if we brought real private investment in back then, the market between then and now is, even with, the recent decline, is up a ton. People would have been way ahead, and they would have had higher benefits rather than lower benefits if we'd actually got that done. So the longer you wait, the harder this becomes. But I think that ultimately, we're going to have a retirement system that has real investment and real investment returns, because a transfer scheme doesn't work unless you can keep population growth booming. And you look at the projections, that's not going to happen.
That ain't happening.
And so these programs are fundamentally unsound from an actuarial standpoint. The bad news, Moon, is that we can't do anything about it politically, because it's too challenging to do as one party. You get killed and demagogued. And so there's got to be a negotiated solution. Democrats won't even talk about it. And so I think for this year, at least, we got to set that aside and just focus on the regular budget that we have some control over. I don't see you get anything done in Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah, I agree. Phil Kerpen, President of American Commitment. Phil, I want to thank you very much. God bless. Thank you for all you do. And hopefully we'll have you on again real soon.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you very much. Good luck. All right, folks, don't forget, check me out, Moongraph Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. Make sure you make a comment. Tell your friends about it, folks, as we grow. It's a gradual growth thing. We love it. I hope you will, too. Next time, join me again on the Moongraph Podcast.